Previously on agentpalmer.com, in a three-network world, always be the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Burn notices Michael Westen deserves a seat at the Best Spy table, and Jennifer has inspired me to get my coffee networking brewing again. This is the Palmer Files, episode 70, with Dr. Yanas Kisten, a marine biologist by day and the force behind Geekoscopy by night. We discuss how academia and his other passions led to Geekoscopy, what it's like working within academia, the reality of being a marine biologist and what he thought it would be, content creation, writing academic papers, science communication, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 70th episode is Dr. Yanas Kisten. He is the proprietor of Geekoscopy, when not working as a PhD in marine biology, but more on that later. I was excited to have this conversation, and not just because of what Geekoscopy is doing, but because my guest is a marine biologist. I never wanted to be a marine biologist, but I know plenty of people who did, and I think that the reality of the job, as you are about to hear, is very different from the dream of becoming a marine biologist. That is not unique to marine biology, but I remember an extensive list of people in my middle and high school years thinking that that would be their career path. I'm not sure how many took it up, but Yanas did. You'll hear us discuss marine biology, of course, but also science communication, academia, content creation, balance, and our passions. All of that is coming your way, and much, much more. But first, if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest, Dr. Yanas Kisten, at Geekoscopy, that's Geekoscopy, or this show at The Palmer Files. You can find more information about Geekoscopy at geekoscopy.com. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Yanas, I'm in love with the concept of Geekoscopy and what you're doing with story, play, and science. But it doesn't feel like something that you just came up with one night. Was there an evolution to how this came to be?
Oh yeah, it's a long evolution that I think begins in 2015, around 2016. And at that time, I was like halfway, early on in my PhD. And I was having some trouble like getting my work like published with academic journals. And it's a serious thing, so it's not that easy to do. It's a bit easier for me now that I have experience, but early on, if you don't know how things work, then you're going to get rejected quite a bit. So I wanted to like take out my frustration by just posting my own stuff in the internet and not having anybody reject me, because if I hit publish, no one's going to say no.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, take it into your own hands. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started building like a website, but it wasn't based on science at the time. It was just based on fun stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was just like reviewing anime and video games and stuff like that I was doing in my off time. And that kind of evolved into a podcast that I did with some people. And then that kind of evolved into a YouTube channel. And as I was going, I was realizing that I initially had the problem where publishing what I wanted to publish is not that easy. But I also started to notice that translating that into a form that is consumable by just the everyday guy is also a problem that is very difficult to solve for a lot of people, and especially for scientists, because scientists spend their entire life learning how to communicate in a certain way. And there are certain ways to communicating to other scientists so that their work is understandable and repeatable. But it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody walking in the street can understand what they're saying, because over time, we have developed certain jargons, we have developed certain ways of doing things. So you need this background information in order to read a scientific paper. And it doesn't necessarily work for all of them, but it can go the spectrum of very technical to possibly be able to read by lay people.
I will say that is probably universal to every industry, though. I mean, scientists use... Look, and I studied Latin, and I still get lost in it. But I also think it's the alphabet soup, right? It's the how many acronyms do you have in your industry? And then, if you happen to come from another industry with acronyms, forget about it. Like, you're like, because it's really hard to unlearn something. So if I sit down and you say, I don't know, pod, I think a podcast immediately. Even if you're talking about something else, right? Like, that's where my brain goes. And it's like hard to unlearn that. Yeah.
For sure. Definitely. No, yeah, it is a thing that extends into, I think, definitely most things.
Yeah.
But just generally people aren't doing like very technical stuff.
Yeah.
So understanding the certain language that's used in each field is, you have to be in it to kind of understand, or sometimes you can. Sometimes things do cross.
Okay.
But when it comes to science, it is like some things are very important and needs to be communicated to the general public. For one, it's to close the economic loop, because like a lot of science is funded by taxpayer money. So like you going to a job, and like a certain amount of your paycheck is being taken by the government, and the government is then using that money to fund scientists to do sciencey things. And most of the time you have no idea what they are doing, even though they are communicating it to each other at least. So closing the loop is a very important thing that we talk about when it comes to science communication. And certain things when it comes to like latest developments in health or things to do with the environment, anything that the general public needs to know so they can make informed decisions are things that need to be communicated so that everybody, or at least most people, can understand. It's probably one of the most important things when it comes to communicating science.
This is where it scares me the most, because one of my favorite topics of interest to read about as far as history goes is the internet. The origins of the internet, the origins of networking, which was all funded by the U.S. government in like either ARPA or DARPA. I don't remember what it was called at that particular time, because they've changed their name. But one of the things that's scary to me about translating it into layman's terms for the everyman is that when it's research, you don't always know what you have. Because the history books I've read about the early internet, they didn't they had the concept down. They didn't have practical applications. They didn't have, so
those are very different things though. So what you have in terms of like what the natural world is telling you based on like what you've measured and what you've experimented on.
Okay.
But how it's going to be applied, that you have no control over. And you could have, things like, I'm just a physicist who's going to look at magnetic resonance one day. Then all of a sudden we have MRA machines in doctors' offices. It's like, it's wild.
Yeah.
How certain discoveries can just change technology and the way we interface with things.
And so there's a jump here where you go, well, I'm going to start my own thing. And obviously that's an evolution. But when did you decide, like, all right, you know what? I think I want to make a go at this.
Yeah. So I think it was the end of my PhD. And when I started my postdoctoral research, I decided to kind of blend the two things together, because I had, in my spare time, developed quite a bit of knowledge when it comes to creating content and social media and stuff like that. And the idea that I would like to enter the science communication space. So I just decided to kind of blend those things together, and my love for geek culture and for science and for creating content together to form the science communication brand that also had kind of a flavor of geek culture in it, which is one of my other passions that I've had probably since before I wanted to become a scientist. So yeah, it's kind of a culmination of my life's work in inverted commas. I suppose my life's work and play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically the evolution of the brand and the show.
So what kind of you have a PhD. What's it in?
Yeah, I have a PhD in, I think it's broadly zoology, but it's marine biology.
Okay.
And even more specific than that, because marine biology is a big term and zoology is a very big term. It encompasses a lot of things. But I worked mainly on ecology and ecophysiology of like little baby fishes that you find in an estuary, which is like the area between like a river and the ocean.
Okay.
And that's where these fishes kind of go after they are born to kind of grow up a bit before they go back to complete their life cycle. Yeah, it's a very, very important thing, very interesting work. So yeah, that's what I do for the day job. That's what pays the bills.
And was this something that growing up you wanted to do? Or look, you've got I am one of you in terms of the geekness, right? Like you didn't want to be like Iron Man. Like I mean, marine biology, that's big, but like, there's also engineering.
It's still specific.
Yeah.
This is true. Yeah.
So what was it? What was the start, or was it always?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, because engineer could have been a pathway that I chose. Like when I was choosing after high school, I had two options as to what to do, because I was very interested in like computers and stuff.
Okay.
So I had like computer engineering as a choice, and I had marine biology as a choice. And I'd actually gotten like the offer from the university for computer engineering first, but I was so like passionate about wanting to get into marine biology that I waited until like the last minute, until eventually they sent me the offer, and then I just went down that path. But it started when I was around 8 years old, and it just stemmed from watching like documentaries, like David Attenborough type of stuff.
Okay.
It used to air like 6 o'clock on a Sunday on South African TV. National Geographics, like Walking with Dinosaurs, all that type of stuff. And yeah, marine biology is something I was very interested in pursuing. On the other side is my father used to work at the Navy in South Africa in Durban. So I spent a lot of my early childhood going out to the naval base, like riding on boats, like fishing, like doing a lot of seawater type things. So yeah, it was a combination of that. I think I was always interested in science since I like became aware of the world, because before I wanted to be a marine biologist, I actually wanted to be like a paleontologist.
Okay.
And I wanted to work with like dinosaurs.
I think we all went through that phase at some point.
I think like being into dinosaurs is like a gateway drug for geek culture.
100%.
It's like
yes,
it's where we all like start. It's a gateway drug for getting into geeky and nerdy things. And yeah, I definitely started off there. Somewhere along the way, I fell off. But yeah, I just hooked onto marine biology, and I was on that path from 8 years old until all the way right now, where I am. I'm publishing scientist. So like, yeah, I'm one of those kids who actually went through on their childhood dreams and then ended up getting there. Yeah.
Well, it's also exciting because, you've got this other thing too. How do you balance? Because obviously you have a day job, like, it's, by day, it's like Batman, like, you know what I mean? Like you have the two sides of that. how do you balance it? Because I don't, you don't strike me as the kind
Yeah.
of person that's, you don't look, I mean, we're recording this, but like, you don't look tired, like you've worked 80 hours this week, right? Like, how do you
No,
balance it?
I probably haven't worked 80 hours. That's a bit wild. Well, for one, being a scientist is you can kind of choose your own hours. So it's not that you're working like a 9 to 5. It's gonna vary on a day, like when you're working. Like sometimes I'll be in the lab like at 7 p.m. on a Sunday. That'll just be like the normal thing. But then alternatively, I'll just take a mental health day and like just not go into the office and not go into work and then start like and just do other things. So it's nice in that fact that it is a bit pliable. The problem with that is that you're technically always working. There's always like a paper for you to publish. I have like a good like 10 plus papers that are in various stages of writing that I need to submit to academic journals. Yeah, but burnout in academia is quite a common thing because you are always working. There's always a chance for you to like burn out. So I think it is healthy for you to then work on things or do things that is not work. Otherwise, you will go crazy.
Sure.
or you're some kind of robot that's not barely human and you just pump out papers every day. But the thing is like being a geek has never really negatively influenced my academic performance. I've been playing video games and like, yeah, I've been playing video games since I was 4 years old with like the Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog, and played video games throughout high school, throughout undergrad. I had, for my honors degree, I had a cum laude. Yeah, I had like dean's commendation. So it never really affected my academic performance. But as I got more into being a scientist, it is a bit more demanding on you because it is very high level thinking that you have to do. It's a lot of work, a lot of statistics, a lot of writing. So you just have to actively, I think, take time for yourself, which is what I do. Like I don't intend to like die in front of my desk writing a paper. It's like I find a balance, and yeah, I like to do other things, and I'm not like doing all my geeky stuff all the time. Like there'd be times where I'm just focused just on work, just on writing, just on collecting data. And then I take a break and do other things. So one of the things why I wanted to actually start a science communication brand was so that I could do it a bit more professionally. So maybe I can feel a little bit better about it. Because I also like creating content is also like one of my hobbies. So I just want to be creating things and putting stuff out there.
It's a good hobby to have. I mean, I've been creating content for over a decade now, and I can't imagine not. But I also feel like I've talked to academics before, and one of the things I think that, I'm trying to read between the lines only because it feels like I'm hearing it and you're screaming it is like, no, like writing academic papers is so hard. Like now you're in it and you may have 10 in various stages of writing, but you can take an afternoon off and hit publish on something for yourself and immediately cut through all of those stages and just go, all right, I've actually created something that's out in the internet. And I think the other thing is academic papers are only read by so many people. Like I don't have necessarily the access, whereas you can put out a review of anything, a movie, a book, a video game on and everybody can see it.
Yeah, for sure. You're 100% correct. I have far more impressions on the stuff that I've published. That I've published myself, videos that have been watched versus how much that my academic papers have done. And I think I remember reading a study a couple of years back where they found that it's like about 50% of all academic journals are read only by the authors who wrote it, the people, the editors who are about to publish it, and like the reviewers that they send it to for peer review. And that's like a handful of people. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that seems so sad, it seems so wasteful, but it's just how the system works. Because some system is like, I mean, so some science is like blue sky type of stuff where it's not. It's important for advancing our knowledge and advancing science, but not everybody needs to read it because it doesn't like apply to them in a meaningful way.
Well, I also think it goes back to what you were talking about at the very beginning, which is it's not English. I mean, it is, but it's not, right? Like, yeah, I mean, okay,
Yeah.
I know that the words are in my native tongue, but you put them in such a way that I have no idea. Like, and I've attempted to read some scientific papers, and I consider myself a fairly intelligent human being, but there are times when I'm just lost.
Yeah.
Like it's like
it's encrypted.
yeah, it really like it's like what I guess this is all right, okay. I don't cuz I almost feel like I need to read the summary and leave it alone and then find somebody who knows something about it. Cuz the summary I'm like, "Oh, I want to know more." And then I start reading and I go, "I don't want to know more. Like I made a mistake. Get me out of this. I need to stop." But the summary I'm good with.
Sure.
I'm like, "Okay, this is great."
Yeah. See, that's why I think science journalists and science communicators are really important, and they should be getting some funding and some jobs so they can translate science. But yeah, I mean, it's not even like all scientists know how to read all science papers. That's like also crazy because scientists are very, very like they niche down so much into their field that I wouldn't be able to read like a latest chemistry paper and tell you what's going on because that's not my field.
Yeah.
Or geology or physics. Like it would be just as foreign to me as just a random dude. So it's very, very specific. And yeah, one of those things that you learn when you get higher up in science is just the less you know about anything. It's like it's kind of really weird. It's like the more you know, like the less you actually know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true of just knowledge in general. I mean, it's not even specific.
Yeah.
Like, pick up any book, especially a history book, and read it, and you're going to learn about a lot of things. But you're also going to learn about a lot of things you didn't even know existed, and then those things have books about them, and you're like, oh no, like you're like, oh, I want to know about this one thing. Oh, there's a book about that one thing. Pick it up. Oh, they talked about these 10 things I'd never heard of before. Now there are 10 more books you could, like, it just kind of breeds itself. And you're like, oh, wow. Yep. The more I know, the more I don't.
yeah, for sure. It is definitely like that. You're just learning about what you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's actually part of like the scientific process because you actually want to know what you don't know so that you could write a study to find something to add to something that we know now that we didn't know before.
So
that's the scientific process.
Are you thinking that, the professional sciences for you are good for current day job, but Geekoscopy as it is the future, or is it going to remain a balance between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would prefer to be doing science communication full time.
Okay.
For probably two reasons. Like I said, burnout is a very big thing in academic life. It is in content creation as well.
Yeah,
but I think I'll be better.
It's a little bit both. Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to like scientific papers, it feels a lot more serious than it would like making a video or a podcast. And also like it's not like, I mean, to be frank, it's not a very well-paying thing. Like you go through at least 10 years of just study to get there. And I mean, I get paid just like average South African salary, and like South African salary is probably like nothing compared to like the West.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's frustrating, like being, like an adult person and just like living paycheck to paycheck, but you have like 4 degrees and you're like, somebody lied to me in the 90s for these degrees. So yeah, it's one of those things where you have to be super, super passionate about publishing science, if it's to be your main thing. And I don't think I'm there. I'm passionate about learning about science. I'm passionate about communicating science. I'm even passionate about like running experiments, but writing and publication, I don't think is, I mean, I could do it for the rest of my life to make a buck, but I don't think it's the ideal thing for me right now, or going forward.
When you talk about content creation, right? I mean, obviously you've got a YouTube channel, you've done podcasts, you've got, articles on the site. Is there a medium you prefer? Like, I mean, you're dabbling in all of it, right? Like you're doing the written stuff,
Yeah.
you're doing the audio, you've done the audio stuff, you're doing the video stuff. Like when you talk about content creation going forward, is it just all three, or like is there one you want to focus on?
I'm kind of like a serial dabbler, like even when it comes to like science, like because I'm broadly interested in like marine animals, but I've worked with like very different types of animals all my career, from like little like bivalve mussels to like corals to like fish to like little snails. And it's kind of the same when it comes to content creation. I'm just really interested every time a new format comes out or every time a new platform comes out that I can dabble in. And I enjoy making content in most forms. I enjoy like writing for the mass audience. I enjoy speaking on a podcast like this. I really enjoy editing videos. I think my maximum creativity is unlocked when I'm editing a video and doing like really funky edits and effects and all types of like, funky, interesting things. It just takes a lot of time. So like when you're not getting paid for it, it's difficult to like devote time to like editing videos. But I think I'm probably the most happiest when I'm like editing a nice, interesting and educational video. It's probably just like that's my peak performance, sort of doing something like that.
All right. So you spent all this time and energy becoming a marine biologist. Where do you pick up video editing? Like where is that on the journey? Because that's not like I understand you pick up writing along the way. You have to.
Yeah.
But video editing is a very specific skill set.
Yeah. The thing with like, becoming a scientist is that a lot of skills that you learn can be transferred or translated to other things. You just have to like, I suppose, have the brain connectivity to kind of transfer those skills over. So in when you're an academic, you do have to tend to do a lot of like PowerPoint presentations, like present your work. And with PowerPoint presentations comes a certain degree of just graphic design. And so like I used to have a lot of fun when I was making my PowerPoint presentations and adding like animations and making it like kind of like interactive. So a lot of that translated into video editing.
Okay.
I mean, I had like my parents, like my dad had a like home video camera like for as long as I can remember. So I remember shooting videos and then editing them later. I remember just like taking pictures of like anime and stuff and like trying to animate that on like PowerPoint. So I've been dabbling in that type of visual editing for a long time. Just doing it on an offhand basis, like not really knowing what I was kind of doing and that I was dabbling in it. I was just doing stuff for fun. And then, so it's one of those things where I didn't realize I was, doing a lot of it until I formally decided, okay, I'm going to like start editing videos properly now. So it's one of those things where, I didn't realize I was doing it until I started doing it properly. But I also consumed a lot of like YouTube content. especially when I had started like buying my own video games after like starting to earn some money.
Okay.
I had gotten deep into like just media around video games, like reviews and like podcasts and stuff like that. And a lot of my off time, I think maybe I probably spent more hours like listening to video game podcasts than like playing them at one point.
Hey, look, right now I probably spend more time watching people play video games on like Twitch and YouTube than I do actually playing video games. So I
Yeah.
get it. Like, I'm right there with you. Sometimes it's
I
just
know.
enjoyable to, I mean, it's one of the reasons people enjoy cutscenes too. Like, it's just a movie and I enjoy the characters, but I don't really feel like playing right now. Let me just
Yeah.
sit back.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also like it's also like a form of video that you can consume passively, like while you're doing other stuff, like when you're working out or like cooking. Or
Yeah.
I remember listening to like gaming podcasts while I was like pipetting things in a lab for like hours. So yeah, I just consumed a lot of media, so I was very like interested in it. And then at some point I decided, let me just start doing my own thing and seeing like where that can go. Yeah. So I've always had that dabbler mindset, and then eventually it like grew, and then at some point I was like, okay, let me do this properly now, maybe professionally.
Is there like a dream scenario of like a television series, a movie, like a documentary? Is there a bigger video project that you would like to get to at some point?
I think when I was younger, I was thinking about, if I could have became like a movie director. There's certain IPs that I would like to get my hands on and make a movie about. Like, I don't know if you're into fantasy a lot, but there's a series called Redwall written by Brian Jock that I really enjoyed as a kid. And yeah, if I could get my hands on that IP and like some kind of studio funding, that would be like pie in the sky. I would make a Redwall movie or something. Look,
they're going heavy into every book they can possibly find right now. So,
at this point, yeah.
I mean, and here's the thing I'll say. I've got a couple books in my back pocket that I'm like, I hope nobody ever touches this. Like, there are some books I feel like deserve to remain books.
Yeah.
But I'm not against people taking the chance. It's just there's some books I hold sacred, and I will, don't touch that. It's a book.
The thing is, like, if they make something about it, like, it doesn't change the original material. It's just a new thing.
No, I know,
but I do get that feeling of like exclusivity that there is some merit to it.
I reread The Hobbit recently. Guess what? Ian McKellen is now my Gandalf. I do not know what I ever pictured Gandalf to be before, but now and forever it's Ian McKellen, picture. Right? So, I think the same goes for like, even when I read like old X-Men comics, it's Patrick Stewart. Like it's one of those things where like, and like,
it's Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
It's
any other way.
It's RDJ as Iron Man. Like, I can't do any. Even when I read the books that were published well before any of these movies, like that's who it is. That's who I hear in my head. That's who I see when I think about it. If I'm not looking at the panel, so for me, that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm afraid of it. Yeah, it doesn't change the original, but you have to like kind of erase that from your brain at some point. Like that's my fear.
Yeah. Well, like perhaps with time it will change, but it is very recent.
Yeah.
But I think like for Geekoscopy, the more I would say realistic goal is to just have a functioning like science communication media company that kind of like offers services to scientists or universities to translate they work into a more palatable format for the general audience. That's the goal right now with Geekoscopy.
And I think it's probably a super admirable goal. It's one of the reasons that I kind of started following you was because science and play I understand, right? Like I get that to a T, but adding story to the mix as one of your three things. Story's hard for people to comprehend. Like there are examples, and I can't think of any right now, but there are examples of like major motion pictures that just get story wrong. And I'm not talking like beginning, middle, end. I'm just like, they skipped a scene that ends up, you end up seeing it in, on DVD extras, and you're like, this adds so, like, how did they cut this? It's so important to the story, right? And that's just fiction. So when you take it to science communication, that's everything, because you need to be able to build the foundation of whatever it is, either foundational knowledge, 1 + 1 is 2, or 2 + 1 is 3 and 1 + 2 is 3, right? Like little things that like you see how these things go, and now we're going to jump to the next. And it's a level of storytelling that is super important. And I don't know if people focus on it enough. I think people take for granted that we got to the end and that was fun, and we don't realize like how did we get there? Like all of these things build.
For sure. And it's, I mean, like human beings have been likened to actually being like storytelling machines. Like we think in stories. It's how, like, we talk to ourselves in stories, and we teach ourselves, and other people teach us. And I mean, at one point, it was the only way that we communicated and told each other about how the environment works, and like what to look out for, dangers, and like how to do certain things in life. So it is an innate thing when it comes to human beings and communication, and just like being alive and functioning in society. And when it comes to science, that story is kind of replaced by the scientific method, which is good for being able to repeat and replicate and have a structure to how you want to describe something in the world.
Yeah.
Not so great at teaching somebody what that means to them and what it means to their story. So putting that storytelling back into science is kind of the job of science communicators and science journalists. And doing it well takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of learning, trial and error, but people have to do it.
That relatability seems like the hardest piece to it, because I feel like you could probably, let's take Iron Man, for example, just because I mentioned it earlier. Like, you could probably give me a decent Iron Man story, and because I already like Iron Man, I get it. I understand it. But like somebody who's never read a comic or never seen a Marvel movie is going to be like, what are you talking about? Right? And it's that relatability to everyone, to the general populace, that's so hard to translate. Do you have like a go-to like of like people that you run it by that you're like, I don't know?
The thing is, right now I am not I'm not practicing science communication in that way, where I am taking pieces of content and trying to kind of teach the general public.
Okay.
The way I do it is that I make references to geek culture, and then make references to kind of explain certain scientific like concepts.
Okay.
But even that I've only done like a few times. My main thing that I do right now for Geekoscopy 101, which is my podcast, is interview other science communicators and see what they are doing in their way to communicate their science. Or on the flip side of that, like scientists who kind of use geek culture in their science as a reference to pull in people. So it's kind of like two sides of kind of a similar coin. But like I recently like interviewed a doctor of anthropology who deals with kind of religion and myth. And she basically posits that like our geek culture and pop culture right now is kind of our mythology. It's stories that we are telling that kind of is likened to things like Zeus and like Thor back in the days. Like those things sound foreign and ancient to us now, but that at the time that, it was relevant, it was probably a little more like, Thor in Marvel right now, or like Iron Man.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that.
It's just stories that we tell that are important to us, that makes it a myth and part of our culture. So I use that side of kind of pop culture and geek culture to try and translate, and see how other people are doing it as well. So people who are like creating video games to teach science or to communicate science, people who are doing podcasts, people who are using different formats like TikTok. I'm just trying to absorb from them and kind of also highlight to other people, to other scientists, as to how you could go about communicating your science, or to geeks as to oh, you like Pikachu? There's like a protein or an enzyme that the scientists called Pikachurin because of how lightning fast it is. It's references like that. I just want to boost geeks' ego and kind of highlight scientists and science communicators. So yeah, I have fun with it in that way for my show right now.
It sounds like, and I don't say this often, but it sounds like you're really having fun with the platform in a way where it still keeps you grounded in the academic, which you don't necessarily need for talking to all these people, but that's a very good base to stand on. That's a very good knowledge base to have, and then to reach out with all the fun stuff, the Pokemon, the Marvel, like the Star Wars, like all that other fun stuff. If you had told 10-year-old you that this is what you would be doing, would you have even believed yourself?
No, I don't think I would have believed myself. Because if I would have believed that, I might not have gone into science. I might have become like a movie director or something. Yeah, if I had believed that, for sure, it's not something I thought I would be doing when I was a kid. And I mean, I'm not like doing it professionally yet. Like I'm a professional scientist, but not a professional science communicator yet. So I still have a ways to go. But I don't think 10 years ago I thought I would be dabbling in this. So I'd moved a bit away from academia, which is what I thought the role I thought I would die in.
Is there a part of you that wants to teach? Like, I mean, actually, academically teach.
Yeah, I mean, I dabbled with being a lecturer a couple of years ago, and it kind of wasn't for me.
Okay.
I don't think the format of like live teaching is the best way that I can communicate, or the most fun way that I can communicate. I can do it.
Yeah.
But I think it's not my preferred way of doing things. I would rather sit and make a 10-minute video, and I would be able to explain it way better than if I just stand there and talk to some kids. I mean, the other ways of teaching include like just having like class discussions.
Yeah.
Which I think would be better for me than just vomiting out information at kids' faces, hoping that they consume it, absorb it in some way. Yeah, it's not my preferred way of doing things.
Now, I asked this because I have a 4-year degree, and that's as far as I went. The teaching, the teaching aspect of it, was that something that everybody has to do? Was that something you wanted to try just to see how it went?
Yeah, lecturing at like a tertiary institution is kind of one of those things that comes with the whole gig of if you want to be a researcher at a university, lecturing is one of those things that is part of the position. Okay. But I think some researchers ideally would just be able to do research, and in that case, you probably have a position not at a university, like a research institute or a government lab or something like that, which is, I think, what I would have preferred later on. But if I did want to end up at a university, then lecturing would be something that I would have to do as part of the job, which is kind of weird because, high school teachers need to have like a degree in training in order to teach. And that's very important. But lecturers at like university don't really have to have one of those things. Like, okay, you got your PhD, like just go teach kids about science now. It's kind of weird.
The more I learn about academia, the more I don't like it.
Join the club.
Well, that's the thing. I'm on the outside looking in. And I'm like, yeah, that's not that none of this. Like, I guess I'm in awe of you that you're still in it, because like, I guess I'm in awe of anybody who's still in it, because very few people enjoy. I mean, they enjoy some of the things, right? Like, there's some academic conferences where you get to talk with like-minded individuals at and you know, and that kind of, and network with people, maybe even in a different field that can teach you something new. But as far as like the day to day, and going back to what you talked about earlier, publishing a paper for 3 people, a paper that probably took you months to research and put together and write and edit. Like, none of that sounds good at all.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, I mean, like, your experience in academia is going to be variable. I don't think everybody's going to have the same experience that I did. Or other people do. And sometimes, like, if you're really angry about something, you might be a lot more vocal than somebody who's just happily trudging along and they don't really have any problem. They're not going to like go online and be like, I had a great day today in academia. So it's one of those things that's difficult. Like, you can't generalize too much. Like, some people are probably having a great time and others not so much. But I think there are fundamental problems with academia that needs to be addressed. It is one of those weird fields where, like, you would think that it's like high tech and like new and like cutting edge. And sure, some of the science is, but I think the institution around it is kind of like backwards and stale and old. And kind of needs a software update in many respects. And I'm sure some universities already, or some institutions are already there, and other people need to catch up. So yeah, it's a variable thing.
I mean, look, every time you or I have said academia during this podcast, I've thought of a library, like a legit library with like journal, like physical journal. I don't know if that's just my age showing or what, but like when you talk about academia, I don't think of the internet, right? Like, I know your paper is probably on there somewhere, but I think of a physical paper or a book or like a leather bound library.
Yeah. And that's actually like a very accurate way of picturing it, because the whole way we communicate the science is like a written document that gets like shelved away somewhere. And it is like you have online repositories now, but they are kind of run like libraries, and like sometimes access is restricted and like you have to ask permission, and it's a very weird thing. Like, you would think by now, like, all other forms of media have progressed. We have like virtual reality happening now, but academia is still like written word, like printed, like print media. Like, we like killed print media like 10 years ago at least, when it comes to everything else. But academia is still there. And there is like burgeoning efforts to do things like video summaries, video abstracts of papers, but it's a very new thing that's trying to push through now. It's so new that like I'm aware of most of the people who are doing it.
Let me, before I forget to ask this, you are a marine biologist.
Yes.
How often do you get to go to the water?
I mean, it varies. Right now, I am not collecting any data in the field, so for the rest of the year, I shouldn't be going. But last year, I was in the field during the season when I was collecting data like every week. So I used to go every week out to collect some fish and then bring them back to my aquarium and kind of torture them for a bit in the name of science. And yeah, so it depends on the project. It depends what you're working on. Sometimes it could be once in a season. Sometimes it could be every week. Sometimes it could be every other day. Sometimes you could be out at sea for a long while, although I haven't done that. It varies from project to project.
I mean, because I feel like 10-year-old you that wants to be a marine biologist is not thinking about sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. No. You're thinking you're going to be on the beach, on a boat, in the water. You're thinking about being in the field.
Yeah, because I have like a very like vivid memory of what marine biologists looked like when I was 8 years old, and it is like somebody like a dude or a girl like on a boat out at sea, like tagging a dolphin or a whale, and I am so far removed from something like that. It's like not even funny. Yeah, I've been out in a couple of boats, but like not out at sea, maybe a couple of times, but not for sampling. It's like mostly in an estuary, which is like glorified river.
Yeah.
It's not even out at sea. So yeah, it's. I mean, it's close, but it's so different from what I imagined for sure back in the day.
What I find interesting about this conversation is the relatability of being able to explain the complex or even just the unknown, even if it's simple, to a broader general audience. That is the goal of science communicators, and there are plenty out there, many who have appeared on the Geekoscopy podcast, but they exist in all walks of content, podcasts, YouTube, blogs. And science communicators are just the tip of the iceberg. There are also policy communicators, plenty of other specialists on various platforms. So suffice to say that if you want to learn about something, there is someone out there whose passion it is to explain it to you like you're not an expert. And perhaps that's you. Perhaps you have something you know in detail that you can explain to friends in the simplest terms. That's a hugely underrated skill, and if that's you, let me know. But if you just watch someone else, let me know that too. It's always great to understand our world better, and to do it without having to lean on my rusty knowledge of the Latin language would be better for everyone, don't you think? Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 70. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Dr. Yanas Kisten at Geekoscopy, that's Geekoscopy, or this show at the Palmer Files. You can find more information about Geekoscopy at geekoscopy.com. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Yanas, do you have one final question for me?
I would like to know, like, if becoming an academic was an option for you, like, what kind of field would you be in right now? What would you be studying? What would you be experimenting on?
That's a good question. I know that academia was kind of I looked at it as a way to avoid the real world, right? Like I got my 2-year degree and went, all right, time for a 4-year degree. And I got my 4-year degree and I couldn't make a decision on what else to do. So there was never a postgraduate thing, and I've never gone back to it. But there's always that thing in the back of my head of like, what would it be? Right. Like, so my associate's is in liberal arts. How general can you get? And my bachelor's is in communications. Again, how general can you get? So one of the reasons that it's hard for me to answer this question is because I can't answer the question that is the most important, which is, what do you study? Like, what do you get for a master's degree? And while communications is slightly less general than liberal arts, you have to get fairly specific when you go master's degree in whatever. And I've run the gamut. Like, I guess, there's a part of me that thinks like, I'm not really that good at business, so maybe getting an MBA would be interesting. But I think practically speaking, I have a problem with academia that is related to fields I'm interested in being fast moving, right? So I graduated from college as we record this 18 years ago. Very little of my actual classroom textbooks is relevant now. In fact, 10 years ago, it wasn't relevant anymore, right? Like things are moving so fast that I worry about not being I'm like you in that I'm a dabbler and I'm interested in a lot of different things. So the idea of buckling down on one very specific thing that I have the foresight to know may be outdated by the time I finish this degree is a scary proposition for me. I mean, you're a marine biologist. Like, do you find that it's similar, or like, I mean, I'm talking general in terms of communications, right? Like when I was in college, we did a lot of study on newspapers and mass communication, and newspapers still exist, but it's not the number one medium like it used to be. Have things changed for you since you've graduated?
Yeah. I mean, science in general is going ever forward, and a lot of the things that you could do easily or for cheaply are probably already done. So the cutting edge stuff usually is stuff that you need equipment that costs like millions of dollars in order for you to do. So it's one of those things where it comes down to funding, being able to get the funding to do what you would like. And in order to get the funding, you probably need to be in a field that they're offering the funding for, or for a topic that they are offering the funding for. So it has changed significantly. Like, I think earlier on, I was really interested in just animal behavior, and I wanted to study just cephalopods, like octopus and cuttlefish, and like what they did, because it's very interesting, I think. Never got around to it because like there wasn't much opportunity locally. So I ended up doing the next best thing, which is fish, which also have a brain and have behaviors. So that's the work that I do here. So it's kind of a combination of what you want to do and where there's opportunity and where there's funding when it comes to academia and science.
Yeah, and that's I think the other thing that would have stopped me is like, all right, well, you have to go where the money is. Well, if I have to go where the money is, then I don't really get to choose what I want to do now, do I? Like, if I want to really study, I don't know, like, I mean, because I go back, right? And, 8-year-old me was going to be either a paleontologist or an aerospace engineer. And neither of those things actually happened. But, I feel bad for any paleontologist because everybody points to Jurassic Park and goes, so that's what you want, right? Like it's just like every, archaeologist has to deal with Indiana Jones. The aerospace thing, man, if I had done that, now is the golden age. I mean, it's out of government, it's out of government hands now. So now it's in the private sector, which means not only can you do cool things, you can actually get paid. Whereas, 30 years ago when I was 8, it was, you're going to work for NASA. Like that, there was nowhere else to go, really.
There were no options. Sure.
I feel like now though, and look, I was unemployed for a long time and I thought about going back to school, but I always go like I don't know if I can focus enough on one thing to really get out of it what I need to put into it to get out of it, right? So I think for me, I'll keep my 2 and my 4-year degree. I probably won't get anything else, but that's fine. And now I get to.
What did you like to do, like a study in like podcasting or something? Is there a question you would like to answer?
I don't know. I've become a grumpy old man when it comes to podcasts. I'm becoming a grumpy old man when it comes to a lot of things.
Everything, yeah.
But
It's just
I think
the human condition of getting older.
I guess. I don't know. I don't think there's any one question. I think I'm just curious to talk to people. I think I'm just generally interested in the long form conversation. I'm interested in talking to you for an hour and a half without my phone and without other things, without the TV on or a stream on in the background, and just being in the moment and listening to what you have to say and genuinely reacting to that. I guess that's a form of anthropology. That's probably as far as I'll go, right? Because I'm not just talking to other podcasters. I'm not just talking to other content creators. I've talked to business owners and authors and, actors and writers and musicians. So I generally am just a curious individual. So I do fit that mold, but I think that's where it ends because, again, I'm not talking to the same kind of person and I'm not trying to get the same thing. So it's like, whatever comes comes. And I'm excited at the variety of it. And I think that while I'm sure there's variety for you, you're not writing the same paper 10 times. You're still in a certain sector that I don't know if I could live that specifically in for that long.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. No, I understand. I also feel that way. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Yeah, I understand how you feel. It's kind of like it's more of a consumer type of thing. Like you just enjoy doing this, and even though you're creating, you're kind of consuming the feeling of what you're doing, how you're feeling when you're creating. So for sure, it's one of those things where sometimes we really don't want to answer any questions, and it just means you probably are not fit for academia and not fit to become a researcher. But it doesn't mean you're any less than. It's just a different way of life. And I've come to the point now where I do have questions I would like to answer, but I think I've run out of that whatever energy I had when I was younger that drove me to answer those questions. So now it's kind of just a day job for me, and everybody has to do work to get paid. And I'm not bad at it, which would be really terrible. I'm really good at it. That's why I'm still publishing papers. So it's kind of a weird thing. I think my mindset is very different now than it was when I first got into this stuff, and I was super passionate about becoming a scientist. And I think those were one of the weird things, because I was super passionate about becoming a scientist, not actually. I don't know whether I was passionate about doing research or answering questions about the world. So I became a scientist. And I picked off a box, and then I was kind of a bit lost.
All right, now what?
Now what? Yeah. So I'm kind of in a weird place in terms of that. But I totally get where you're coming from. I have a similar type of feelings.